Story number 1. The Whispering Walls. In the autumn of 2001, I moved into the Ashford Manor with my younger sister, Clara. The grand house was located in a secluded suburb in the United States, overshadowed by tales of paranormal activity. Our closest neighbors were Jesse, a young journalist in his late 20s, and Maddie, a talented medium with a flair for unveiling the mysteries of the spirit world. From the very first night, the house greeted us with cold whispers, as if breathing tales from ages past. Each evening, as the sun set and the shadows grew long, the walls would mutter incoherent words, phrases only half uttered, like a dream barely remembered upon waking. One evening, while I was exploring the vast library, a distinctive whisper caught my attention. "Look behind the seventh shelf." Pushing aside the dusty volumes, I discovered a loose plank. Behind it lay an old diary, dated back to the early 1900s. The diary belonged to a woman named Abigail. As Clara and I pored over its pages, a horrifying tale unfolded. Abigail wrote about her love affair with a man named Edward, which ended in a tragic death, hers. She detailed rituals, exorcisms, and dark rites. The diary hinted at a sinister cult, involving devil worship and dark sacrifices. Abigail's final entry was unfinished, ending with the words, "He's here." As days turned into weeks, Clara and I, driven by a blend of curiosity and terror, decided to unravel the mystery. Jesse, having caught wind of our findings, offered to document the events, hoping to uncover a groundbreaking story. Maddie, with her medium abilities, was eager to communicate with the spirits that inhabited Ashford Manor. Under Maddie's guidance, we held a séance. As candles flickered and an eerie silence enveloped the room, Maddie began to chant. The temperature dropped, and the room was filled with whispers, growing louder and more frantic. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed throughout the manor. Maddie, her face pale and voice shaking, relayed the message. Abigail's spirit was trapped in the house, along with others, victims of the cult that once thrived within these walls. The head of this cult? None other than Edward, who lured young women into the house, only to sacrifice them in his unholy rituals. Abigail's death had been the climax of his wicked deeds. The spirits wanted justice. Realizing the severity of the situation, Jesse used his contacts to dig deeper. He unearthed old newspaper clippings that reported a series of unexplained deaths in Ashford Manor. Each victim was a young woman, last seen with a mysterious man fitting Edward's description. As our search for answers intensified, so did the paranormal phenomena. Objects moved on their own, ghostly apparitions appeared, and the walls whispered more fervently, guiding us towards the truth. One night, the whispers led us to the basement. As we descended, the air grew colder and a heavy dread filled my heart. The walls directed us to a concealed chamber. Inside, we found the remains of several women, including a locket with Abigail's picture. The spirits grew restless, demanding justice. Maddie, understanding their pain, suggested a final ritual to free the trapped souls and banish Edward's malevolent spirit. Gathering in the main hall, Maddie began chanting as Jesse documented the event. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew out the candles, plunging the room into darkness. A shadowy figure, unmistakably Edward, emerged, lashing out in rage. The walls of Ashford Manor came alive, their whispers growing deafening. They recounted Edward's crimes, each voice a testimony of his heinous acts. Overwhelmed, Edward's spirit screamed in agony, slowly dissipating into nothingness. As dawn broke, the house was silent. The spirits were free. We left Ashford Manor soon after, but the memory stayed. Jesse's documentation became a renowned piece on the supernatural, while Maddie continued to aid tormented spirits. Clara and I found peace, grateful for the whispers that guided us. Even now, years later, I sometimes wake up to faint murmurs. The walls, it seems, never truly stop whispering. Story number 2. The Lonely Lighthouse. In 2002, I, Michael, took up the isolated job of a lighthouse keeper in a small suburb by the coast of the United States. The lighthouse stood tall and proud, its beacon a guiding light for lost sailors. The place was serene, with just the sound of the crashing waves and the occasional calls of seagulls. Joining me were Liam, my assistant, and Eliza, a local historian fascinated by the lore surrounding our lighthouse. One stormy night, while ensuring the lighthouse beam was steady, I noticed a figure by the cliffside. A woman in a white dress, her long hair billowing in the storm, stood at the very edge, looking up at me with hauntingly hollow eyes, her hand beckoning me. Thinking her to be someone in distress, I raced down, but she vanished before I reached her. This vision repeated itself several times, always on stormy nights. Eliza, having seen my growing distress, began to dig deeper into the history of our lonely outpost. With her came two individuals, Alex, a young journalist with an appetite for the supernatural, and Tara, a talented psychic known for her connection with the otherworldly. As they interviewed me, Eliza unveiled a tragic tale from the archives. Decades ago, a woman named Lila lived in the lighthouse with her love, a sailor. One fateful night, he didn't return. Devastated and unable to bear the pain, Lila wore her favorite white dress and walked into the raging storm, taking her own life by the cliffs. Tara, sensitive to the energies of the place, felt Lila's lingering anguish. She explained that Lila's spirit was trapped, reliving her despair, trying to pull others, like me, into her cycle of sorrow. The pieces began to fall into place. The sightings, the beckoning, Lila wanted company in her eternal misery. Alex, ever the skeptic, decided to set up cameras to capture evidence of Lila's apparition. However, the deeper we delved, the darker the truth became. Eliza unearthed stories of exorcism deaths linked to the lighthouse, unexplained disappearances, and whispers of devil worship. Rumors suggested that Lila's lover had been a victim of a cult that sought power through sacrifices, and Lila had unknowingly become a part of their ritual. One evening, with a storm brewing, Tara suggested performing a ritual to free Lila's soul and protect me from her grasp. As the rain began to pour, we gathered in a circle. Tara started chanting, her voice blending with the thunder and wind. Suddenly, the lighthouse was filled with tormented screams, and Lila's apparition appeared, more menacing than ever. Behind her, shadowy figures danced, the members of the ancient cult, their malevolence palpable. In the ensuing chaos, Eliza and Liam recited verses to protect us, their voices a beacon of hope amidst the dark. Tara's chants grew louder, her energy pushing back against the tide of evil. With a final, heart-wrenching scream, Lila's spirit disintegrated, her soul finally freed. But the malevolent spirits of the cult remained. Alex, gathering his courage, began playing recordings of sacred verses he'd prepared, their resonance dispelling the dark entities one by one. As dawn broke, the storm and spirits were silenced. The lighthouse stood calm, its cursed past put to rest. In the days that followed, Eliza documented the events, ensuring the lighthouse's history would never be forgotten. Alex's footage became a sensation, turning skeptics into believers. Tara continued her journey to aid troubled spirits, and Liam stayed by my side, steadfast as ever. And I remained the keeper of the lighthouse, no longer lonely, forever grateful for the brave souls who stood with me against the darkness. Story number 3. Echoes of Elm Street. 2003, Elm Street, a quiet suburb of the United States, carried a dark legend that I, Nora, would soon discover firsthand. My closest friend, Ethan, had always been fascinated by the tales surrounding the abandoned house at the end of the street. Every Halloween, like clockwork, the dilapidated mansion would come alive with flickering lights and the sounds of a roaring 1920s party. But Elm Street had a warning: enter on Halloween, and you won't return. Late October, a team decided to document the phenomenon. There was Veronica, a passionate paranormal investigator, Lucas, an audio technician eager to capture the spectral sounds, and Sophie, a young historian aiming to uncover the past. As Halloween approached, we gathered around Veronica's collection of equipment, preparing for the night. Sophie had dug up an old article from the 1920s. It detailed a lavish Halloween party thrown by the mansion's owner, a wealthy businessman with rumored ties to occult practices. The party ended in tragedy. The guests were found lifeless the next morning, their cause of death undetermined. On Halloween night, we set up our equipment outside the mansion, Lucas's microphones picking up the faint sounds of jazz and laughter. Ethan, ever the brave one, proposed we venture inside. I was hesitant, but Veronica's excitement was infectious. As the door creaked open, the sounds grew louder, and we stepped into the past. The house was alive with spectral guests, dancing and celebrating, seemingly unaware of our presence. But as we ventured deeper, a sense of dread enveloped us. In the grand ballroom stood a large pentagram, flickering candles at each point, and a hooded figure chanting in the center. Veronica, with a mixture of fear and fascination, recognized it as an ancient devil-worshipping ritual. The figure was attempting to harness souls, explaining the mysterious deaths of the partygoers and those who ventured in on Halloween. Suddenly, the hooded figure stopped chanting, turning its gaze upon us. The room grew cold, and the spectral guests turned hostile, their once jovial faces now twisted in rage. Ethan, thinking quickly, grabbed a nearby candlestick and disrupted the pentagram. The hooded figure screamed in anguish, and the spirits began to wail. Veronica, drawing from her knowledge of the occult, started reciting an exorcism chant. Lucas and Sophie, using the equipment, amplified Veronica's voice. The mansion trembled, and a bright light enveloped us. When it cleared, the spirits had vanished, leaving only the five of us in the cold, silent house. We exited the mansion, the weight of the night heavy on our shoulders. The legends of Elm Street were no longer just tales, but a terrifying reality we had faced and survived. Sophie's findings and our footage became a documentary, shedding light on the haunted history of Elm Street. Lucas's audio, filled with the eerie sounds of the past, became a testament to the afterlife. Veronica continued her investigations, while Ethan and I, having faced the supernatural, decided to stick to the safety of our mundane world. But every Halloween, as I pass by Elm Street, I can't help but remember the echoes of that night and the souls we freed from eternal torment. Story number 4. The Cursed Carousel. In 2004, a chill autumn evening in a quiet suburb of the United States, I, Clara, found myself being drawn to a story that would forever haunt my memories. My childhood friend, Jake, and I had grown up hearing tales of the old, abandoned theme park at the edge of town. But one attraction stood out in all the legends, the Cursed Carousel. It was said that on moonlit nights, the carousel would start spinning on its own, the eerie melody of its old tune echoing in the stillness. Ghostly apparitions of children were seen riding it, their translucent figures laughing and waving, a stark contrast to the decay around them. And the most terrifying part? Anyone who dared approach the carousel in an attempt to halt its spectral dance would simply vanish. Curiosity piqued, Jake and I decided to investigate. We teamed up with Naomi, an ambitious journalist with a knack for uncovering dark secrets, and Adrian, a soft-spoken medium who could communicate with the spirit world. The four of us met on a cold October evening, our car headlights casting long shadows across the rusty park gates. With each step, the tales of the cursed carousel weighed heavily on our minds. But it wasn't until we heard the distant chimes of the carousel's tune that reality truly set in. Drawing closer, the sight was mesmerizing. The carousel, despite years of neglect, shone brilliantly under the moonlight. Ghostly children rode its painted horses, their laughter both joyous and haunting. Adrian, his face pale, whispered that these were trapped souls, children lured by a malevolent spirit bound to the carousel. As we discussed our next move, Naomi, camera in hand, edged closer to get a better shot. Suddenly, the music grew louder, more insistent. The ghostly children's eyes turned red, and they began reaching out towards Naomi. Before we could react, a vortex of wind and darkness enveloped her, and she vanished. Panicking, Jake and I called out to Adrian for guidance. He said that the carousel was a trap, powered by devil worship and dark rituals performed by the park's founder. The souls of the children were harnessed to fuel his quest for eternal life. Naomi had become its latest victim. Determined to save her and the trapped souls, Adrian began an intense exorcism. Chanting ancient verses, he confronted the malevolent spirit, demanding it release its hold. The carousel spun faster, its music distorted and chaotic. Jake, mustering courage, joined Adrian's chant, his voice blending in a powerful harmony. As I watched, paralyzed by fear and hope, the ground around the carousel began to crack, revealing pentagrams and symbols of dark magic. With a deafening scream, the malevolent spirit manifested, a grotesque figure that once was the park's founder. But Adrian's and Jake's combined efforts began weakening it. The ghostly children, their chains of entrapment breaking, circled the entity, their innocent voices singing a lullaby of freedom. With a final, desperate cry, the malevolent spirit was banished, the ground sealing up once again. The carousel slowed to a stop, its music silenced forever. The ghostly children, free from their torment, faded away with smiles of gratitude. Adrian, exhausted, said the park was now cleansed. But Naomi was nowhere to be found. Just as we began to lose hope, we heard a soft voice call out. Emerging from behind the carousel, disoriented but alive, was Naomi. The four of us left the park, our bond forged in the fires of a supernatural battle. The cursed carousel's reign of terror was over. In the days that followed, Jake and I, along with Naomi's detailed account, shared the story with our town. Adrian continued his spiritual journey, forever vigilant against the darkness. But every Halloween, as children dress up and laughter fills the air, I remember the ghostly children of the cursed carousel and offer a silent prayer of gratitude for their freedom. Story number 5. The Silent Cinema. 2005, in a forgotten corner of a suburb in the United States, Ben, stumbled upon a tale that would forever be etched in my memories. My closest friend, Alice, had been an avid lover of vintage films, and she had told me stories of an old silent cinema that had been shut down for decades. The legend had it that every Halloween, the abandoned cinema would light up, its projector mysteriously playing old films, and the souls who ventured inside would become its permanent audience. One October evening, as Halloween approached, Alice, our mutual friend Leo, and I decided to investigate the phenomena. With us, we had Emily, a keen documentary filmmaker, and Alex, a local historian with a penchant for the paranormal. As we approached the cinema on Halloween night, the large neon sign reading "Now Showing" flickered to life. Pushing open the cobweb doors, we stepped into a grandiose theater, the projector humming to life, casting black and white images on the big screen. Intrigued, Alice, Leo, and I took our seats while Emily began filming, her excitement palpable. Alex, engrossed in a dusty old ledger he'd found, started muttering about devil worship and dark rituals. He discovered that the cinema's original owner was rumored to have been involved in the occult, aiming to capture souls through his films, making them his eternal audience. As the silent film played, the characters on screen seemed to become more lifelike, their movements eerily fluid. Then, to our horror, the characters began reaching out, beckoning us. Drawn by an inexplicable force, Alice and Leo began walking trance-like towards the screen. Panicking, I tried to pull them back, but it was as if they were under a spell. Emily, tears streaming down her face, continued to film, capturing the horror unfolding. Alex, snapping into action, began reciting an exorcism incantation, trying to break the cinema's hold on our friends. The theater rumbled, and ghostly apparitions appeared, reenacting the rituals Alex was reading about. At the heart of it all was the cinema's owner, his malevolent spirit orchestrating the dark events. The film on screen began to warp, showcasing grotesque scenes of devil worship and sacrificial rituals. Alice and Leo, just inches from the screen, seemed almost lost. Emily, using her camera's bright light, focused in on the spectral cinema owner, momentarily blinding him. Seizing the opportunity, Alex intensified his exorcism chant. The apparitions wailed, their ethereal forms dissolving, as the cinema owner's spirit shrieked in defeat. The projector sputtered and died, the screen now blank. Alice and Leo, freed from their trance, collapsed into our arms, their faces pale. We exited the cinema, the weight of the night pressing down on us. The silent cinema had tried to claim us, but we had narrowly escaped its clutches. Emily's footage was made into a chilling documentary, revealing the terrifying truth behind the haunted cinema. Alex, having faced the dark past, continued his research, hoping to prevent other such incidents. Alice, Leo, and I, having witnessed the supernatural's power, chose to leave that world behind. But each Halloween, as I hear tales of ghostly happenings, I remember that fateful night at the silent cinema and shudder at the thought of what might have been. Story number 6. The Haunted Dollhouse. 2006, in a quiet suburb of the United States, my life changed forever. My name is Chloe, and back then, I was an ambitious reporter for a local newspaper. Always on the hunt for an intriguing story, I had no idea the universe was about to serve me the most chilling tale of my life. It started when my younger sister, Lila, received a peculiar gift on her birthday, a vintage dollhouse that was an eerily accurate replica of our childhood home. I remember remarking how intricately crafted it was, each room mirroring ours down to the tiniest detail. Things got weird when Lila began talking about the miniature figures inside the dollhouse moving on their own. At first, I dismissed it as a child's vivid imagination. That was until I witnessed it for myself. One evening, while Lila was at a friend's house, I studied the dollhouse. In the tiny living room, I noticed the figures, miniature versions of our family, enacting a scene where they were having a heated argument. The following day, a very similar disagreement erupted in our actual living room. It was uncanny. I decided to share this with my best friend, Jake, a skeptic by nature, and a psychology major. He joked about it initially, but became intrigued enough to witness the phenomena for himself. Alongside us, we involved Heather, an anthropology student with a fascination for ancient relics, and Darren, a parapsychologist. One fateful evening, the four of us sat around the dollhouse, observing. In the dollhouse, we watched a dark figure, one that wasn't there before, perform a ritual in the miniature living room. We watched in horror as the figures of our family seemed to be entranced, joining the dark figure in some form of devil worship. The next morning, Lila seemed distant, almost in a trance. As the day went by, she drew a pentagram on the floor and began chanting in a language none of us understood. Panic set in. Darren mentioned a case of a possessed artifact that mirrored real-life events. Heather, through her research, found out that the dollhouse once belonged to a family accused of devil worship, and they had used the dollhouse in their rituals. The family had met untimely deaths, and their souls, it seemed, were trapped in the dollhouse, trying to replay their past. Desperate, we consulted an exorcist, hoping to free Lila and our family from this curse. The exorcism was tense. Lila, possessed by the spirit of the family's patriarch, fought back, but with combined efforts, the spirits were exorcised from her and the dollhouse. Jake and Heather, deeply affected by the events, decided to document everything, turning it into a research paper on the influence of cursed artifacts. Darren, with the dollhouse in his possession, vowed to find a way to free the trapped souls for good. As for Lila and me, we moved away from that house, leaving the dark memories behind. Yet every Halloween, as stories of hauntings and possessions fill the air, I remember the haunted dollhouse and the time when the line between reality and the supernatural blurred terrifyingly. Story number 7. Echoes from the Deep. In the autumn of 2007, as the first chill of Halloween brushed our coastal town, I, Daniel, witnessed the most haunting tale of my life. My fiancée, Lucy, and I had moved into an old house that had been in my family for generations, overlooking the gray expanse of the ocean. The view was mesmerizing, but as Halloween approached, the stories of the sunken ship and its ghostly crew filled the town's air. Legend had it that every Halloween, a ship known as the Silent Mariner would surface from the depths, bringing with it its cursed crew. They were believed to be seeking revenge on the descendants of those who had betrayed them centuries ago. While I dismissed these tales as mere superstitions, my disbelief was about to be shattered. One evening, Lucy and I invited our friends, Eliza, a marine archaeologist, and Max, a historian with expertise in local lore, over for dinner. As the evening descended into night, we noticed a thick fog enveloping the shore. Through it, the ghostly silhouette of a shipwreck appeared, its sails torn, and its mast creaking ominously. Max, with widened eyes, spoke of the Silent Mariner's tragic history. The ship was betrayed by its own crew and townspeople, leading to its sinking. He whispered that some of our ancestors were involved, making Lucy and me direct descendants of the betrayers. A shiver ran down my spine. As the night deepened, we heard the echoing chants of the ghostly crew. Shadows, shaped like men with ragged clothing, moved towards our house. Eliza, fascinated and terrified at the same time, theorized that perhaps some underwater phenomena or shipwreck recovery might have triggered this paranormal event. Max feared that they sought revenge, and we were their targets. We barricaded ourselves in, but the phantoms were relentless. Eliza, in a brave attempt, tried communicating, revealing her knowledge about the ocean and its secrets. To our surprise, the captain of the ghostly crew materialized, speaking of a stolen locket that needed to be returned to the ship to set their souls free. Lucy remembered an old family heirloom, a rusted locket, passed down through generations. With hope and fear mingling in our hearts, she handed it over to the captain. As he touched it, a blinding light engulfed the room, and when it faded, the apparitions were gone. The next day, the town was buzzing with stories of ghostly encounters. Max documented the events, collaborating with Eliza to piece together the history and marine aspects of the haunting. Their work became a local sensation, blending history, science, and the supernatural. Lucy and I, forever marked by that fateful night, decided to move inland, leaving behind the ocean and its haunting memories. But every Halloween, even from afar, I remember the echoes from the deep in the night when the past came back seeking redemption. Story number 8. The Ghostly Gardener. 2008 remains a year etched in my mind, when the veil between our world and the supernatural thinned in the suburb where I, Emma, resided. I had recently become a widow, the vast mansion I lived in serving as a constant reminder of my loneliness. The garden, once meticulously maintained by my late husband, now lay unkempt. One cold October night, I saw a young man in the garden. Bathed in the moonlight, he diligently pruned the roses and watered the lilies. Surprised, I approached him, but he vanished, leaving me in cold, numbing shock. The next evening, and for many that followed, he reappeared. He was a ghostly gardener, a shimmering presence under the moon's glow. My curiosity grew into a yearning to communicate, to understand his haunting presence. One evening, as the wind carried whispers of lost souls, he spoke. "I am Liam." I recognized that name. He was the son of our gardener who had passed away a few years ago in an unfortunate accident in our very garden. The revelation sent shivers down my spine. Liam's spirit told me of his secret affection for me, a love he never dared confess. As the days turned into nights, our conversations grew longer. His tale was one of unspoken feelings, missed opportunities, and a life ended too soon. But my encounters with Liam did not go unnoticed. My close friend, Julia, an investigative journalist, became suspicious. Accompanying her was Oliver, a parapsychologist, and Alice, an intuitive psychic. Their arrival turned my house into a hub of paranormal research. Alice, with her heightened senses, felt an overpowering aura of grief and yearning around Liam. She suspected his spirit was anchored due to his untimely death and unresolved emotions. Julia dug deep into the archives, unveiling the sinister truth of devil worship and ritualistic sacrifices that once plagued our suburb. Oliver hypothesized that these dark rituals might be the root cause of heightened paranormal activities in our neighborhood. Liam confessed that he was accidentally killed during one such ritual, aimed at harnessing young souls. His love for me was the only thing that held him back from being completely consumed by the darkness. Determined to set Liam's spirit free, we held a seance on Halloween night. Using ancient rituals and Alice's psychic prowess, we beckoned other spirits trapped by the same dark forces. The atmosphere grew cold, candles flickered, and ghostly whispers filled the room. In the midst of the seance, a portal to the other side opened. Through tearful goodbyes and promises of meeting in another life, I watched as Liam, along with other spirits, stepped into the light, finally finding their peace. As dawn broke, the garden bloomed in a way it hadn't in months, signaling the end of the dark era. Julia, Oliver, and Alice left, their mission accomplished, but the memories of that fateful Halloween lingered. The ghostly gardener was gone, but in the heart of the garden he once tended to, I planted a rosebush in his memory, a silent testament to an eternal love story that blossomed amidst the shadows. Story number 9. The Haunted Headphones. The year was 2009. It was the summer before college, and my days were filled with cleaning out the old family home in our quiet American suburb, making room for a new chapter. My name is Daniel. One sweltering day, I found myself in the attic, surrounded by memories. Dusty photo albums, worn-out toys, and amidst it all, a pair of old leather headphones. Curiosity got the better of me, and I put them on, expecting to hear nothing. But to my surprise, they hummed to life. Whispers, distorted music, and the promise of a hidden treasure in our very home were audible. Each day, the voices guided me, step by step, clue by clue. I was obsessed, pulling away from the real world, spiraling deeper into this enigmatic audio-driven treasure hunt. My childhood friend, Lucy, noticed my bizarre behavior. Along with her came Harrison, a historian passionate about urban legends, Clara, an investigative journalist, and Ethan, who dabbled in the occult. Together, we delved into the mystery of the headphones. The whispers, Harrison discovered, belonged to members of a devil-worshipping cult from the early 1900s. They had lived in my family home, performing dark rituals and sacrifices. This cult believed that their amassed wealth, buried somewhere in the house, would grant them immortality if offered to the devil. As days blurred into nights, with each clue I unearthed, the voices grew more demanding, urging me to hasten my search. Ethan's research indicated that the headphones were a conduit for the spirits of the cult members. They intended to trap my soul as the final sacrifice, completing their century-old ritual. The very ground I stood on became a treacherous maze. Walls shifted, floors gave way, revealing hidden chambers laden with symbols of the occult. Guided by the sinister whispers, I found myself in the heart of the house, where the treasure lay. But it was not gold or jewels. It was a grotesque altar, stained with the blood of countless victims, waiting for me. Lucy and the team devised a plan. Using a mix of ancient exorcism rites and Ethan's occult knowledge, they sought to cleanse the house and free me from the malevolent grip of the headphones. The confrontation occurred on Halloween night. The attic became a battleground of good versus evil. The air was thick with tension, the voices screamed in defiance, and the very fabric of reality seemed to tear. But with unwavering resolve, my friends pushed back against the dark forces. When dawn broke, the headphones lay silent and lifeless. Ethan sealed them in a box lined with protective symbols, ensuring they'd never ensnare another soul. The house felt lighter, free of its tormented past. Grateful, I sold it, eager to put distance between me and the horrors of that summer. Looking back, it still sends chills down my spine. Those haunted headphones, a relic from a bygone era, nearly cost me everything. Now, every time I see a pair of headphones, I can't help but recall the whispers from the past, forever echoing in the recesses of my mind. Story number 10. The Crying Child of Crescent Street. 2010, Crescent Street, was the year and place that would forever haunt my memories. My name is Martin. Sarah and I had just moved into our first home together, a charming but aging townhouse on Crescent Street. The neighborhood was peaceful, save for the harrowing cries of a child that echoed each night. These heart-wrenching sobs were so profound that even the oldest residents had grown up with the lore. Determined to find the source, Sarah and I teamed up with Ryan, a local historian, and Laura, a medium with a reputation for communicating with the departed. The first few nights of our investigation yielded nothing but eerie chills. However, one evening, as we meticulously combed our basement, Laura felt a powerful energy emanating from behind a bricked-up section of the wall. With a few forceful swings of a sledgehammer, we unveiled a forgotten underground room. In the dim light, the sight before us was chilling, an old, rotting cradle, and the faint apparition of a child. The ghostly figure seemed to focus on Laura, his eyes filled with an ocean of sadness. Through Laura's medium abilities, we learned that the spirit was of a boy named Ethan. In the early 1900s, he had been separated from his family due to circumstances tied to devil worship. The followers of this dark path believed in a ritual that required the tears of an innocent child. Ethan had been trapped and left to perish in that very room, forever separated from his family. His soul, unable to move on due to the traumatic circumstances of his death, was trapped in an eternal loop of sorrow. Our next goal was to reunite Ethan with his family. Ryan's historical archives indicated a tragic fire in the early 1900s where Ethan's family perished, trying to rescue him, unaware he was locked away beneath their home. Laura, using her skills, conducted a seance on Halloween night. The air turned frigid, and the room was filled with the sounds of murmuring voices and Ethan's inconsolable cries. But as the night progressed, the cries began to soften, replaced with voices of joy and reunion. When dawn broke, the room was silent. Laura confirmed that Ethan's soul had finally reunited with his family, breaking the cycle of sorrow that had gripped Crescent Street for over a century. Sarah and I moved shortly after, unable to shake off the weight of the history our home carried. But the legacy of Crescent Street lives on in whispers, a testament to the enduring power of love and the lengths one will go to reunite with their loved ones. Every time I pass an old home or hear the distant cry of a child, I'm reminded of that fateful year when the cries of Crescent Street were finally silenced. Story number 11. The Phantom Photographer. The small suburban town in 2011 held a secret that became my obsession. My name is Alex, and my two best friends, Maya and Josh, shared a fascination for the old abandoned Benson photo studio. Legend said it was haunted by a phantom photographer who'd vanished years ago. One fateful October, Maya, an aspiring journalist, wanted to write a piece on haunted places for a local publication. Josh, being a photographer, suggested the Benson studio, and I, ever the skeptic, wanted to tag along. In our research, we came across two essential figures, Clara, an elderly woman who once worked at the studio, and Detective Sean, who had investigated the photographer's mysterious disappearance. Clara's account was chilling. She recounted how the photographer, named Edgar, dabbled in the occult and devil worship. He believed that by capturing souls through photos, he could gain immortality. One Halloween, after photographing a ritual, he vanished, leaving behind only the photos with his ghostly silhouette in each one. Detective Sean's files suggested that multiple unexplained deaths occurred after the victims visited the studio, but there was no concrete evidence connecting the two. All the victims had a photo taken at the studio, and all had the ghostly figure of a man behind them. On Halloween night, driven by curiosity and youthful bravado, Maya, Josh, and I decided to test the legend. The moon was at its peak when we sneaked into the studio. Dust-laden and time-worn, the room was silent, save for our hushed whispers. With trembling hands, Josh set up his camera. I volunteered to be the subject, still skeptical of the tales. The flash went off, illuminating the room for a split second. As Josh retrieved the photo, his face turned ghostly white. Behind my cheerful pose was the distinct and eerie figure of Edgar, his eyes piercingly focused on me. Panicking, we rushed to leave but found the studio door jammed. Cold air filled the room, and a voice whispered, "Your soul is mine." It was then that Clara and Detective Sean, having heard of our plan and fearing the worst, burst through the door. Clara began chanting an exorcism spell she'd learned from her ancestors, hoping to free the trapped souls and banish Edgar's spirit. As she chanted, photographs flew off the walls, and shadows danced violently. A ghostly wind swirled around us, and the voice screamed in defiance. But as dawn approached, calmness settled. The room felt lighter, free of its dark history. The studio was demolished shortly after, ensuring no one else would fall victim to its curse. Maya's article made local headlines, warning of the dangers of tampering with the supernatural. As I look back, the sheer terror of that night remains vivid. The photo of me with Edgar's ghost is a chilling reminder of the close encounter with the otherworldly, a night where curiosity nearly cost us our souls. Story number 12. The Haunting of Hollow Hollow. 2012 was the year I swore I'd never return to Hollow Hollow. My name is Elise, and what I witnessed alongside my best friend, Brian, during that town's Halloween festival is something I can never forget. I'd recently moved back to Hollow Hollow after finishing college. Brian, who never left, was always enthusiastic about the annual Halloween festival, particularly the play reenacting the legend of the cursed witch, Abigail. This year, he'd bagged the lead role and was more than thrilled. Our friends, Lydia, a librarian who was passionate about the town's history, Mark, a local police officer, and Anna, a schoolteacher, were all involved in the festival. The play's script told of a witch named Abigail who, after being falsely accused of devil worship and causing unexplained deaths, had cursed Hollow Hollow. She promised that one day her story would come to life, seeking vengeance. As the festival drew near, Lydia revealed an old manuscript she discovered. It claimed that the play wasn't mere fiction, but based on real events and that Abigail's curse was real. Naturally, most of us dismissed it, except Anna, who had always felt a connection to Abigail and believed the curse was genuine. The night of the festival was cold and eerily quiet. As the play progressed, I noticed peculiar occurrences, props moving on their own, whispers when no one was talking, and shadows that didn't belong to anyone. By the climax of the play, when Abigail was to be burned, Anna, playing the witch, began to chant in a voice that wasn't hers. The wooden stage inexplicably caught fire, and the audience screamed in horror. Mark and his team tried to control the blaze, but it was Anna's haunting chant that seemed to be feeding it. Lydia, having done her research, began a counter-chant to neutralize the curse, calling upon the spirits to quell Abigail's rage and begging for forgiveness. I joined in, clutching Brian's hand, reciting the words Lydia shouted. The wind howled, the fire roared, and Anna's voice reached an ear-piercing pitch. Then, as suddenly as it began, silence. The fire was out, leaving only wisps of smoke behind. Anna lay unconscious at the center of the stage. When she awoke, she had no memory of the event but felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The town decided to abandon the play, respecting the real horrors that Abigail had faced. The memories of that night still send shivers down my spine. Hollow Hollow's Halloween of 2012 serves as a grave reminder that some legends are more than just stories and that tampering with the past can have dire consequences in the present. Story number 13. The Forgotten Diary. In 2013, I moved into a charming old home in a quiet suburb. My partner, Alex, and I were beyond excited. The house had been on the market for a long time and needed a lot of work, but we saw potential. Within the first week, Alex found an old diary while refurbishing the living room. Bound in faded leather and inscribed with elegant, old-world handwriting, it was dated 1913. We began reading it, each entry describing the life of a woman named Clara. As we went along, the events she described began playing out in our home. Creaks where she'd written about footsteps, lights flickering when she documented power outages. Initially, we thought it was the house just being old, but the precision of the events was too uncanny. Two of our friends, Rachel, a journalist always chasing a story, and Thomas, a researcher with an interest in paranormal phenomena, became deeply involved when we shared our discoveries. Together, we dived deeper into the diary. As Halloween approached, the diary revealed more disturbing events. Clara wrote about hearing voices, practicing rituals she'd learned from an old book to contact her deceased husband, and her growing obsession with devil worship. It was clear that Clara had been dabbling in something she shouldn't have. On October 30th, Clara's entry detailed an exorcism that had taken place in the house. It had been performed by a local priest after Clara's behavior became erratic and violent. She wrote about being tied down, the priest chanting, and a shadowy figure lurking just beyond her vision. However, the diary revealed that the exorcism had failed. Terrifyingly, the next entry was dated October 31st, but it was blank. As the days in our real life approached Halloween, the events in our house became increasingly sinister. Objects moved on their own, and the shadowy figure Clara had described appeared, always lurking at the edge of our vision. We all felt a palpable dread about the upcoming night. Determined to break the cycle, Rachel, having some knowledge of rituals, suggested we perform a cleansing ceremony on Halloween night. Using the diary as our guide, we retraced the steps of the failed exorcism. As midnight approached, our surroundings became cold, and the shadowy figure became more prominent. Holding hands and reciting the cleansing chant, the figure lunged towards us, its features contorted with rage. Suddenly, the entire house trembled. As we held our ground and continued the ritual, the entity screamed and finally dissipated, leaving an eerie silence. Breathing heavily, we realized we'd been successful where the priest had failed. From that day on, our home was peaceful, the memories of Clara and her haunting diary fading into the background. However, every Halloween, I can't shake the feeling of being watched, a reminder of the horrors that once took place within these walls. Story number 14. The Haunting of Room 313. 2014, the year my friends and I embarked on a journey that would forever change our lives. We'd heard tales of the haunted Mayfair Hotel in the suburbs, especially about Room 313. The room was permanently locked, with guests reporting sinister noises from within. Being adventurous, my friends Sam, Maria, and I decided to spend a night at the hotel on Halloween. Joining us were Jake, an experienced paranormal investigator, and Lily, a journalist looking for an elusive story. As the evening began, the ambience of the hotel was relatively normal, except for the cold aura emanating from the hallway leading to room 313. I remember walking by and hearing soft whispers that sent shivers down my spine. Maria, a skeptic, laughed it off, attributing it to old hotel noises. But even she couldn't deny the goosebumps on her arms. Later, as the clock neared midnight, we found an envelope slipped under our door. It read, "You're cordially invited to room 313. Stunned, we looked up to find the door to room 313 ajar, a dim light flickering from within. Driven by curiosity and adrenaline, we decided to venture in. The room, though covered in dust, seemed stuck in time. Jake set up his equipment, eager to capture any paranormal activity. As we settled, an old journal lay on the bedside table, filled with entries of rituals, devil worship, and detailed accounts of an exorcism that took place in that very room. Reading aloud, Lily's voice trembled as we learned about a young woman named Annabelle, who had been possessed by a demon and subjected to an exorcism. The ritual had gone horribly wrong, resulting in Annabelle's death and the subsequent haunting of room 313. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. Our breaths became visible in the cold air, and the room was filled with echoes of a girl crying, her cries becoming louder and more agonized. The room's lights flickered as we saw the faint apparition of Annabelle, her eyes hollow, her expression one of anguish. Frozen in terror, Sam tried communicating, offering solace and seeking answers. Through broken whispers, Annabelle spoke of betrayal, of the priest who failed her, and the demon that still roamed free. Recognizing the opportunity, Jake began a series of chants he'd learned, hoping to free Annabelle's tormented spirit. The room grew chaotic, objects flew, windows shattered, and Annabelle's ghostly figure became more distinct, her cries reaching a deafening pitch. As the last chant was recited, a blinding light filled the room. The oppressive aura lifted, leaving an overwhelming sense of peace. Annabelle's spirit, now free, smiled gratefully before vanishing. Exiting room 313, we locked the door behind us, vowing never to return. Years have passed since that night, and the haunting memories remain. Although room 313 remains locked, guests no longer hear the eerie sounds. But every Halloween, I remember the terrified spirit of Annabelle and the night we faced the unspeakable horrors of the Mayfair Hotel. Story number 15. The Shadow Artist. 2015, a year I'll never forget. The fall was particularly vibrant that year. My best friend Zoe and I were both avid art enthusiasts, always on the lookout for emerging talents. One afternoon, we were drawn to the opening of a new gallery in a quiet suburb. This gallery was showcasing the works of an up-and-coming artist named Leonard Vance, who was garnering attention for his unique and ominous art pieces. From the moment we stepped into the gallery, a peculiar feeling gripped me. Leonard's art was captivating yet unsettling. His paintings seemed to possess an eerie movement, with shadows dancing behind the main figures. Joining us that day were Claire, a renowned art critic, Mark, a historian with an interest in ancient rituals, and Anna, a local journalist hoping to cover the event for her paper. As Zoe and I delved deeper into the gallery, the ambience became increasingly oppressive. It felt like the shadows from the paintings were reaching out, trying to pull us into their dark world. Claire, with her keen critic's eye, was the first to notice a strange pattern in the shadows. They all had a specific form, an outline that looked hauntingly familiar, resembling human silhouettes. Mark, intrigued by this discovery, began recounting tales of ancient artists who were believed to use remains of the dead to infuse life into their art. The pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place when Anna stumbled upon a news article on her phone about a series of unexplained deaths and missing persons in the suburb. The chilling revelation was the timeline of these events coinciding with Leonard Vance's rise to fame. Feeling a growing dread, Zoe and I decided to confront Leonard. Cornering him in his studio at the back of the gallery, we demanded answers. Under pressure, Leonard broke down, confessing his dark secret. In his pursuit of creating living art, he had dabbled in forbidden rituals, using ashes of the deceased in his paintings to capture their spirits. Suddenly, the room grew cold. We watched in horror as shadowy figures emerged from his paintings, their haunting cries filling the air. These were the trapped souls, the ones Leonard had bound to his art. Mark, drawing on his knowledge of ancient rituals, began chanting verses believed to release trapped spirits. The room was engulfed in chaos as the shadows writhed and twisted, trying to break free. With a final, deafening scream, the room was plunged into darkness. When the lights flickered back on, Leonard was gone, leaving behind his cursed artwork. We fled the gallery, vowing to seal it off. But the memories of that day remain, a chilling reminder of the price of ambition and the thin boundary between art and the macabre. Every Halloween since, as darkness descends, I remember the shadows, the cries, and the tormented soul of the shadow artist.